Okay, in this video lesson, we're going to be applying the Pythagorean identity. And in order to do this, we're actually going to apply two separate concepts that we understand. First is the Pythagorean identity and everything we know about reciprocals. All 6 versions of the Pythagorean identity is designed for us to know one bit of information to find something different. So in the first one, where it's designed if you know cosine, it helps you find sine. Second one, if you know sine, it'll help you find cosine. Third, if you know secant, it'll help you find tangent. If you know cotangent, this one helps you find cosecant. Next one, if you know tangent, you can find secant. And if you know cosecant, this one helps you find cotangent. While with reciprocals, if we know sine, we know the reciprocal of sine could help us to determine cosecant. If we know cosine, the reciprocal helps you find secant. If we know tangent, the reciprocal is designed to help you determine cotangent. Cosecant helps you find tangent. The reciprocal of secant is cosine. And the reciprocal of cotangent is tangent. So we're going to use all of this information, our knowledge here, to actually begin to apply it. So we're going to look at a process that I will encourage. Let's just say all we know is sine. Well, if we substitute sine into the Pythagorean identity, that could help us to determine the cosine. Now, if we pick up where we left off and take this cosine and actually find the reciprocal of it, we then find secant. If we take this secant, substitute it into the Pythagorean identity, that could help us find tangent. Take tangent, determine the reciprocal, that gives us cotangent. And if we take this cotangent, put it into the Pythagorean identity, that helps us to determine cosecant. So what just happened here was, if all we knew was sine, we could take this one value and begin to apply what we know about the Pythagorean identity and reciprocals to help us find all the other 5 remaining trigonometric functions. Well, I'll propose not going linearly, meaning taking one, then the next. Let's say we took sine and considered putting it into the Pythagorean identity, and of course that would give us cosine. But instead of just taking cosine and using this, let's consider taking sine and finding the reciprocal. That would give us cosecant. So by just taking sine and applying it in both of our processes, we can come up with 2 separate answers. Now if we continue, take this cosine where we left off, substitute it, and find its reciprocal, that help us determine the secant. Whereas with cosecant, we apply the Pythagorean identity, and that gives us cotangent. We can go one more level, take that secant, apply it into the Pythagorean identity, that gives us tangent. And if we found the reciprocal of cotangent, that gives us tangent. So here will be the procedure that I will be recommending as I start to demonstrate some of the application. So consider using both the Pythagorean identity and finding reciprocals with the given information. So let's look at, and if you'll notice, there's an opposites occurring. Once you apply the Pythagorean identity, then you apply reciprocal, then the Pythagorean identity. But the other side, reciprocal first, then followed by Pythagorean identity, and then reciprocal. So there's this opposites, there's an every other. So you would never apply the same procedure twice because it would take you right back to the previous trigonometric function. So let's see. So here's an example. It says find cosine theta and tangent theta if all I'm giving you is cotangent. So you're working with cotangent. So I'll start my little tree with cotangent. And I'll show that I'll apply the Pythagorean identity. That would help me find cosecant. But if I found the reciprocal, that helps me determine tangent. So when considering both options, I noticed that, hey, by finding the reciprocal, I actually found one of the trigonometric functions I'm looking for. Well, if I continue with this, I take my cosecant, find the reciprocal, that gives me sine. And if I find the Pythagorean identity using tangent, that helps me find secant. I continue. Sine inside the Pythagorean identity helps me find cosine, which happens to be one of the trig functions I need to find. But I still consider what happens with secant. If I found the reciprocal of secant, that also gives me the cosine that I need to find. So what this does, it visually helps me see a game plan, some options for finding the trigonometric functions I need to determine. And so then I could make an informed decision to say what's the best way of finding cosine and tangent. So it looks here, I will first find the reciprocal of cotangent, which will give me tangent. Then, second, I'll apply the Pythagorean identity using tangent, the answer I just found. Then the third thing I'm going to do is take that answer of secant I just got, reciprocate it, and that'll give me cosine. So this schematic, this flow chart, will help me visualize a thought process and how I will take what was given and use both reciprocals and Pythagorean identity to help me find what I need to determine. So let's try a problem. All right, we got 3 examples to work through. First thing you might notice with this one, yes, it says find 2 values and they gave you 1, but they also gave you this added information. This information we will use to help us determine the quadrant theta's located. So we're going to use this to do the very first thing, and we're going to determine the sines of x and y. This will be a critical part in solving these problems. And this was that prerequisite skill we learned in an earlier video lesson. So we see we have cosecant. Cosecant was the reciprocal of sine. Sine was associated with y. So cosecant is associated with y. So that lets us know y is positive. And because cotangent is negative, negative means they're different. So our ordered pairs, we know the x is going to be negative and the y is going to be positive. Second step we're going to do now. Now that we have the signs of the coordinates of x and y, let's transition to find the signs of our answers. Well, we need to find tangent. Well, we know tangent is y over x. We already established that y is positive and x is negative. Positive divided by negative, negative. So that means our final answer for tangent will be negative. Next, we need to find sine. Well, sine of theta is the same thing as y. We already established y is positive. So therefore, sine will be positive. So this is a critical step in finding our final answer. So my recommendation is first go ahead and find these signs of our answers. Now we'll work on a game plan. The game plan on how to find the actual values. And this is our little flow chart. We were given cosecant. So we're going to start with cosecant. And our options are either the Pythagorean identity, which would give us cotangent, or using the reciprocals, which gives us sine. And look, if we take the reciprocal, that would help us find sine. So we continue. If I apply what I know about reciprocals for cotangent, helps me find tan. And if I did the Pythagorean identity, that helps me find cosine. Well, we recognize, hey, tangent is the other trig function we're trying to find. So here's the game plan, where it's saying I'm going to do the reciprocal of cosecant. That'll help me find sine. Then I'll come back and use the Pythagorean identity for cosecant, find cotangent, and then flip it, the reciprocal, to give me tangent. So, next step, let's execute this game plan. You said first thing you want to do is reciprocate. Find the reciprocal of cosecant. Well, cosecant was 2. The reciprocal of 2 is 1/2. So there we go. And we said the sign of it was going to be positive. So there's our first answer. Sine of theta, positive 1/2. So you can begin to see how that first step is being applied. Now, we said, what was we going to do next? We was going to use the Pythagorean identity with cosecant. So, there's the version we're using. Cosecant helps us to find cotangent. And we'll begin to substitute, simplify, and solve. So when we substitute that 2, that same cosecant, simplify further, solve by taking the square root on both sides. And we have to recall, when we simplify, we have 2 possible answers. Now, what does this say to do in our game plan? Next, it says find the reciprocal. The reciprocal of plus or minus radical 3 is plus or minus radical 3 over 3. And then we look at what we're trying to find. Tangent. It's supposed to be negative. That lets us know which of those 2 to choose. Our answer is negative radical 3 over 3. Okay, let's try another one. In this case, want us to find secant and cosecant. All they're giving us is cotangent. First step, determine the signs of x and y. Well, they told us cotangent is negative. That means the signs are different. They now tell us cosecant is negative. That means y is negative. So we know x, therefore, is going to be positive, and y is going to be negative. Second step, determine the signs of our answers. Well, we need to find secant. We know secant is 1 over x. X is positive. 1 over positive gives us a positive value. So our final answer for secant will be positive. Next, cosecant. Cosecant is the ratio of 1 over x. 1 over y. Y is negative. 1 over negative, negative. So our final answer for cosecant is negative. Now, let's set up our game plan. We were given cotangent. And we have 2 options. Pythagorean identity will give us cosecant. Hey, that's one of our choices. And if we did the reciprocal, that's tangent. There's cosecant, so we're on a roll here. Let's continue. If I took the reciprocal of cosecant, that's sine. Pythagorean identity of tangent gives us secant. And secant is what we're trying to find. So now we have a game plan. Looks like we'll do the Pythagorean identity with cotangent, help us to find cosecant. And then we'll come back, find the reciprocal, gives us tan, and then apply that into the Pythagorean identity. So let's go ahead and execute this plan. You said, so first thing we're going to do is apply the Pythagorean identity, put cotangent inside to find cosecant. So there's our version we're using. We're going to substitute. We're going to simplify. There's our 1/9. Continue to simplify. And now solve by taking the square root on both sides. When we simplify here, we have our plus or minus. We look a little closer. It says cosecant supposed to be negative. So that's the version we choose. So that's our first answer. Go back to our game plan. It says, okay, go back, take that cotangent, and let's reciprocate. So the reciprocal of cotangent, negative 1/3, is negative 3. So therefore, the tangent is negative 3. Next thing in our game plan says, take that tangent, use the Pythagorean identity. Well, there's the identity we're going to use. And now it's time to substitute, simplify, and solve. So when we substitute the negative 3, it gives us a 9. Simplify, it gives us 10. We solve by taking the square root on both sides. There's our secant with 2 possible answers. When we look back, secant is supposed to be positive. So secant theta, positive 10. So with these 2 examples here, you begin to see how all the little pieces begin to come together. So hopefully this will help you as you begin to practice some of these problems.